My name is Cheryl Stedtler. I'm the director of Project Mishoon. I'm a member of the Hassaminnisco Nipmuc Band, an enrolled member and a tribal council member. Been working on this project for 23 years, last month, yeah, 23 years. And it is my absolute pleasure to be able to bring it to the lake community finally. It's kind of been one of the worst kept secrets on the lake. Everybody kind of knows they're there. Some of them know where they are, but being actually able to show you and tell you about them really makes me glad to be able to finally do that. So for those of you who had asked, I didn't have a map to show you at the time. This is, for lack of a better map, this gives you an idea of what the overall Nipmuc homelands were in the day, and we still consider to be our homelands. It would still go up to the border here in some areas, down into the Providence, Rhode Island area, and the northern part of Connecticut. We really like over this area here. So we're right in the heart of Nipmuc country here. There's also a lot of different spellings to Nipmuc, and that they're all correct. It doesn't matter which way it's spelled. It's a phonetic word. It's how we say it, not how we spell it. Sometimes it designates a different band, but we're all still one group of people. So, Project Mishoon, let me ask you first, how many of you actually been down there to see the one that we burned, that we're working on now? Okay, great. So I do have some people that I'm just starting fresh with. Thanks for coming down. So, for those of you that don't know what a Mishoon is, our ancestors used dugouts or Mishoons. Let me step back a minute. Mishoon is the Algonquin word for dugout canoe, specifically dugout. It doesn't mean birch bark or canoe in general. It means specifically dugout canoe. So the Mishoon is typically used for water navigation on lakes and large ponds. It's very heavy, so it was used where it was made. Doesn't portage very well. So yeah, they're very, very heavy. And typically, you would see it made right by the shoreline, like what we're doing here, but they would be using a tree that was right near the water. We had to bring that one in there. We wouldn't take a tree that didn't need to, especially one that size, that didn't need to come down for some reason. But they would know which ones to steward, which ones needed to come down, and they would usually light a fire around the base of it, as you can see here. And that would weaken the base, and then using some tools to weaken it further till it fell. Then it was put up on supports, so it's under the ground because we have to work all around it, not just inside of it. And then the burning and scraping begins. It's flat across the top when it's so that the logs don't roll off, so it's made flat across the top, and then the fire is lit, and it's usually very hot at that time because you really want to just start that burn and get those coals going. Typically, it would be, well, back in the day, chestnut, but you don't see too many of them these days, so if not any, any at all. White pine was another big choice. The one that's down at the shoreline now is a white pine. So that was the softer wood, and then hardwood that made that hot, intense heat is what would be used for the actual fire itself, and that's the oak that we're using down there now. So as the fire burns, it forms the coals, and as the coals form the charcoal, then the fire is moved up to one end, and then there's a lot of scraping going on, and then the fire is moved back, and more scraping on that end, back and forth and back and forth. And first concentrating on the thinness. So now, for those of you that have been following along, it started to go down, and then they started working on the sides. And now the sides are very thin, so now we're working on the depth. And when the depth is finished, then we'll be working on the outside of it to seal that. That'll also get burned, not intensely, but enough to draw out the resin, the sap, to seal it. This is, so in 2021, Nipmuc's up in Ashfield. This is part of our community burn and Mishoon with the nonprofit Opateo, and that was the first one up there in that area for for generations, really, centuries. This one right here is the one that's going on in Shrewsbury right now. I popped that slide in there last night. So yeah, and this right here is what it's all about. You see, we've got our adults teaching children and our elders coming to see, and so all of these things are part of what this burn is about. This isn't a reenactment. You won't see us down there in regalia. You won't see things going on that would have traditionally been happening in the 1600s. We are passing on a tradition. So we're down there dressed like we are, because that how we're dressed isn't really important to us. It's what we're doing, the community that we're sharing, with each other, that sense of community, the meals, the songs, the just the time spent together, the stories, and visits from other tribal members as well, like other sister tribes that will come and say, oh, hey, this looks great. You know what we did with ours. This is what we did when So a lot of that collaboration and sharing with other tribal communities as well. And for us, we really just love seeing you all come down there as well. And it's been giving us a great opportunity to share with you, about our connection to the land, our connection to the water. This is one of our traditions, and then also teach you about the ones that are in the lake, because I know you want to see that. This, like I said, eating and sharing meals and stuff, we cook right on the Mishoon. I didn't have time to pop one in there, but yes, we had corn, we've had fish, we had fiddleheads, we had venison the first night, this huge feast, and we just put grates across the top, and we're cooking right on there. This is our Sun Squad, Cheryl Holly, and what she's actually doing is helping to control the burn. Right here, she's pouring water along the edges so that they cool down and don't get too hot and then burn too thin. So there's always somebody there with water, constantly cooling it down so it doesn't burn too much and thin out too much. This is the one that's in Ashfield, and you can see how they're pushing the coals down to one side and scraping here, and then they'll move that down and scrape the other side. 24/7, literally around the clock, ever since it's lit in ceremony. And that's what we did Saturday morning on the first thing in the morning, and then it'll go until it's finished, and then there'll be another ceremony there as well for our community members. So let's see, all nice and hollowed out there, pretty thin, nice and smooth. And this is so you can see after all that charcoal is cleaned out. Some people are wondering, had asked me, are you actually going to sit in that thing and paddle? But yeah, it's all cleaned out, and we'll be able to use it. This one right here, he tried to, since he knew about the ones that were in the lake, the fellow that burned this one in Asheville, he tried to replicate this part right here, which we think might be a seat, and it worked out very well for him. We'll see at the end. So, getting to the part that you're all here for, Project Mishoon. So, it all began with eBay. Yeah, well, so let me go back a step here. In 2000, the summer of 2000, there was a recreational diver from Connecticut who found one of the Mishoonish in the lake, and he had come to the state and tried to get the information on what was involved in excavation and permits and everything. And when he realized it was just really beyond his capacity, he was driven to try and find someone to be able to take on the project. And he didn't really know where to turn, so he decided to auction off the whereabouts of that Mishoon on eBay. And fortunately, it found its way to me. And of course, this is Quinn Sigmund. This is where my answers, and then poor Vic, who is the past head or director of the Massachusetts Board of Underwater Archaeological Resources. He was the unfortunate person I had to call up, and and after he talked me off the ledge, he said, "Let's go out and see. I'm glad this found its way to an indigenous community. Let's go out and see if it really is a dugout." So we got out there, and then so I don't need to tell you where Quinsigamine is, you know, but we went out there. Let me get to my pictures. There. A tribal elder. I wasn't an elder then. They're trying to convince me of that now. But yes, one of our tribal elders went out there, and a close friend of our community went out to the site. And the diver who had seen it was originally supposed to mark the site for us with a milk jug. And well, he didn't show up. And so I'm out there. It's raining now. Where I got the umbrella. I'm on the phone. I'm like, "You didn't mark the spot." He says, "Well, I didn't come out." I'm like, "Well, why not?" He said, "It was raining." I'm like, "You're a diver. You're going in the water. What difference does it make?" So anyway, he's saying it's in front of this house. I'm like, "Okay." So when they arrived, they got into the water and everything. It was a little time. It turned out it wasn't in front of that house. So Chris Hugo is the person who actually found the one that was documented that day, and that's all of us gathering over this little drop-down camera right here, trying to see if it actually was. You could see the camera going over the rocks in the wood, and everybody's like, "Ah!" And then we went out and in that spot, and we, in our own little community there, did a little ceremony right in that spot. And then we went and signed the permit for it to protect that particular artifact in the lake. It turned out, well, let me back up one second here. that was what we labeled number one. So some of you know about number one, number two, number three, and I'll talk about that in a little bit more in a few future slides. But when I called up the diver and I said it wasn't in front of that house, he said, that does not sound right to me. So he went back out a few weeks later and called me up and said, how do you feel about twins? I'm like, what? He says, yeah. He says, there's actually two there. They're not far apart. And there was one in front of the house where I said it was. So the one he had listed on eBay was actually not the one we found that day. It was a second one. That's how number one got labeled number one, and are documented as number one, and his got documented as number two. So that's that little story there. So that very day is when the Nipmuc tribal community applied for a permit with the Massachusetts Board of Underwater Archaeological Resources to protect that artifact that was in the lake. We are the first indigenous group in Massachusetts to hold a permit like this, so it's very exciting for us, but also kind of difficult for us to navigate if it weren't for these two gentlemen right here, because I am not an archaeologist, I'm a microbiologist and an elementary school teacher. I would not have known where to begin with this project, but these gentlemen right here are the ones that, guided us. And I'm not gonna say let it, because they've just been on either side of me the whole way, just guiding and talk about this with your community, and you decide in your own circles what you as a tribe want to do. So I am going to ask one of the two of you, sir, would you like to explain what the permit is all about? Because I know we have some residents that would love to know what exactly. So this is David Robinson, and he's the director of the Massachusetts Board of Underwater Archaeological Resources. He's my boss right now. Yes, please?
Sure, and sitting next to me
Yes.
is Vic Mastone, the former director of the Massachusetts Board of Underwater Archaeological Resources for just 32 years.
Just.
Just 32.
Right, so this man was the director when we started at some bit, and they switched places at some point.
So we could tag team. this.
Tag team, go ahead.
We could tag team.
Tag team.
We're like the old guys on the mock.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
All right, let's go first.
So the permit that was issued by Vic to the Nipmuc tribe was a reconnaissance permit. And reconnaissance permits are the kind of the first level permit that allows the permittee to do essentially non-disturbance survey to identify archaeological resources within their permit area. It also allows them to do some limited recovery of artifacts to help identify what they found. That's the permit that the tribe has. That permit gives the tribe exclusive rights to doing reconnaissance archaeological investigations within the lake. All the artifacts that are on the bottom of the lake, including the Mishoon that are there, belong to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. They belong to all of us as a state. And the reconnaissance permit does allow for, at the end of the project, for the permittee to be designated the permanent curator of the materials that they recover, or there's another process, another disposition process that allows the state to basically take a claim to the resources that are there. We haven't gotten to that point yet.
No.
But more, instead of layman's language, if it's on the bottom of the lake and it's what we call cultural material, man-made, of historic nature, it actually is the legal property of the Commonwealth, with them as the only title persons who can get title to those objects. So the dugout canoes belong to the Commonwealth, but at the end of the process, they could get legal title. No one else can, and in fact, anyone else diving and collecting on the lake is essentially violating their permit rights as well as violating state law. Dive as much as you want. Can't take anything, but that's true anywhere. So I mean that, and the other thing here is that with them, we only had two types of permits at the time, and we wanted to make sure they got that sort of claim in there. And the reconnaissance allows it. If we did it today, we might say, oh, let's do a special use permit, which is just for scientific study, but it doesn't give any of those other rights. They're implicit in the way the law is written. Sorry to sound like a policy wonk, but that was my job for 32 years.
Right. So, anything you wanted to add to it?
Just I think it's a really important point that the Nipmuc tribe is the first indigenous group to have a BOAR permit with the
To
state.
apply and to have one.
Okay, so I know that, there are some misconception, and I hope that there are some of you that may have brought some things that you may have found in or around the lake, and we have, our archaeologists are here, and Greg's around
Greg's in the
somewhere
back.
in the back there, and, we're not looking to take or keep them, but we would like to make them part of this project, the history of it. Document them, take photos of them, find out where on the lake you may have found them, and make the information and information share part of that project. I'm not looking to take anything home with me. So please, and I don't think they, so, right. I don't even have, the Swift River, Historical Society has a dugout canoe, and for the longest time, they were concerned that we would want to take it from them. And no, but we want to collaborate with them. We'd like to learn more about it. Let's, learn about it together. So, please, I just want to clear up that misconception that if you do have something, we welcome you to share that information with us, and you can still bring your things home. And it's not too late. If you didn't bring them today and you change your mind, you know where to find me, or you will by the end of the night, so, okay?
And
All right.
Cheryl, if I could just
Wait,
add one
yes,
last
yes,
thing.
go ahead.
It has to be said that, the permits are issued and the work that we do as the board is done for the public benefit. It's done for all of you and for all the citizens of the Commonwealth. We couldn't have a more exemplary permittee than the Nipmuc tribe and the work that Cheryl's done. Case in point, this presentation today and what's happening on the lake. It's extraordinary. And the tribe is in Cheryl to be acknowledged and applauded and thanked for the work that they've done. So, thank you.
Appreciate it, thank you. Okay, so let's talk about the project just a little bit. I promise we'll get to pictures. So the reconnaissance permit just involves a lot of these different things. We have to have someone document and assess them. And all this information is going into an annual report that then goes to the BUA board, and it's all reviewed, and they decide as a board, should we go on with it? Should we renew the permit for another year? And here we are in year 23, so, like year 23. The history of the lake itself, so it's not just learning about the Mishoonish that are down there, it's learning about the whole lake history, what's around the lake, what was under there, the lake survey itself, that's some of that side scan sonar that you had seen if you were down there. We'll look at that in a minute. If we decided that we were going to try and excavate, what are the different methods? Which one might work best? What's the cost on that? Are we able to fund it? And ultimately, where are they going to end up if we were to take them out? Final disposition, where are they going to go, and who's going to provide that perpetual care? Because once they come out of the water, they need to be cared for continually in order for them to stay in that way. Right now, they're in that perfect environment. That's why they're so well preserved, and when they're removed from that, then they're in danger, so they have to be then protected and conserved in a proper way and managed that way for time immemorial. So that's a big thing. The other option is to protect them in place. So, going out there with these, well, there's that guy right there. Going out and doing that, these archaeologists who have experience in underwater research, that's their field, going out there and doing core samples to do carbon dating, to see how old they are, to see the length and the condition, and is there anything else around them. And all those it's been a very long process, and part of it is because of where they're at. They're in about 30 feet of water on the Worcester side. It's about, you told me, like 40 degrees all year round down there. So you need a dry suit. It's dark. If you're on a good day, arm's length, you can see in front of you. So very challenging environment to begin with. And then, so the day, the assessment day, as I explained, sometimes it's going down there in the measurements here. They're taking a core sample. That's what this looks like right here. The sample of wood from one of the Mishoonish so that it can be carbon dated, and all the rocks. So, as part of the reconnaissance permit, we're encouraged to learn as much as we can about it, but we are not really allowed to touch them in any way. Even the divers, when they go down there to do their research, they have to float above the Mishoonish. They can't anchor themselves to the bottom. So everything is hands off unless we have specific permission from the board, and that permission involves, okay, well, who's doing it, how are you going to do it, when are you going to do it, what are you going to use to do all of that to make sure it's done properly and in a protective manner. So on this very day, this was in July, shortly after we got the permit. We got the permit in May. I think this was in July or August. The assessment dive occurred, and
That was the dive, the first dive.
That wasn't the first dive when they found them. That was the first assessment dive.
No, it was the first time that
Correct, yes.
they collected
Yes.
those at Ray
These.
Messick's request.
Oh, yes. So the elder that was out there with us was present on the assessment dive, and he had asked Vic was there as well, is it okay if we have, a rock out of there? And it was cleared. So the divers brought up 2 rocks. This was one of them. And when it was David, I believe, came up, David Truby,
Yes.
handed this to me, and he said, "You're the first Nipmuc to hold this in hundreds of years." Handing that to me, I like turned to a puddle on the dock right there, because here I'm still holding something that, my ancestor last touched, and that was just so meaningful to me. And, as I share this with the members of my Nipmuc community, it means the same thing to them, that this is actually something that one of our ancestors touched, in their daily working environment, just something very important to us.
And Raymond put it in a way of, I'd love to touch something that my ancestors had handled.
Right.
And that was like,
Mhm.
that meant
We
we
can
had
do
to
that.
do a recovery.
Yes.
And plus, from an archaeological point of view, these objects, while they are, you could map what they're in, that doesn't have an interpretive meaning. So it was perfect. Removing them didn't change the archaeological character of the site, which would have come into consideration, but it was clearly not a problem.
Yes,
And
and-
he was, I would say, I've never seen someone so pleased.
Oh, yeah, well, I can totally relate to how he felt, so.
Yes.
And then, one of them was actually given to one of our medicine people, and the other one is the one you see here on the table. That actual same one on the table there, when the Nipmuc community burned one up in Ashfield, to just, attempt that first one, we brought it there and reunited the 2 of them together, and we will be doing the same thing here with even greater importance, because this one comes right from that same lake when we reunite this rock with the Mishoon that we're burning this week. That'll have a great significance for us. So, this is all I ever get to see. I'm not a diver, so that's it for me. And these floats right here, when the divers go down, these are on ropes or lines, and when they get down there, they send these floats up, and I know that they're in the right location and that they're good to go. And then I just watch them until they're all done, and sometimes I see bubbles. But this is what they get to see, and now I promise the images will get better, but for a first try, this is, it was actually pretty good. Remember, only 2 to 3 feet visibility, and
With a light.
yeah. So, yes. Once we had some divers that were skilled in underwater photography and videography, able to come out, and this was about 2007, 2008. The pictures that came back much better. We had video as well to show you. But I want to show you, let me back up here. No, I'm just going to do it. So, because this slope will help me later on when I explain it. The machinish that are there are on a slope like this, and typically when they're submerged, it's only in like chest deep water. You want to just get them below the freeze line, and these at some point found their way down the slope, and that's where they are buried now. I'll show you better pictures of them in a minute. But this is how they were preserved for, not just for the winter time, but if you weren't going to be using them for a long time. Think about your firewood. You don't want it fresh. You leave it outside so it gets seasoned and dried out, and all that moisture is gone. So if you were to leave that Mishoon on the shoreline, same thing's going to happen. You're going to have a giant piece of firewood. In the wintertime, when it's cold out, if there is moisture still left in the wood, what do you hear in the trees when it's really cold? They pop. Why? Because the moisture is freezing in the tree and it's expanding. The same thing would happen there. The Mishoon would split. Some of them actually split in half, look like this. The cracks right down the center there just from being left on the shoreline. So the rocks are put in them to submerge them below the freeze line, and then springtime comes, the rocks come out, pops back up, a little bit of bailing. You've saved yourself 7 days of what's happening down there, which has been very arduous work. Aside, I mean, we're only on Wednesday, and we still have several days to go. But yeah, just very a lot of hard labor down there, burning and scraping, and they're creating a tree as well. Whoop, that one just went up there for, I don't know. All right, so remember this now, because I remember I did tell you here, this is all I ever get to see. So you look at this one here and this one here, those are, it's not showing you any kind of distance or anything, but that's where the two are located in relationship to each other. When we first found number one, it was this one up here, and these lovely technical drawings that David Robinson did on his assessment dives show, right here, this part right here isn't missing, this is just the part that's buried in the silt. So he did, you know, feel around through the silt, make sure it's all there, all intact, same here. Not missing, just what he sees is what he puts in his drawing. So here, let me see, I tried to do this before, I wonder if I can still do it now. I did, it's over here, hold on. I did this the last time I did the presentation. Can I make it bigger? There we go. So, here, you can see, this is the slope now. So there's a little spot here, if it came out a little further, this is probably where they were originally submerged, right along that spot there. But somehow they found their way down the slope, and this is where they're buried in the silt. Both of them, number one and number two. Now I have to see if I can escape this. Yes. Very proud of myself. So, it wasn't long after that first dive when he said, no, that's not right, it's in front of this house, is that I got the phone call. How do you see it? How do you feel about twins? And if you look at them, they are very similar. They're only about 60 feet apart. They look to be approximately the same age. They've been carbon dated into the 1640 range, 1640 to 1660, yeah. So, they are fragile, about the consistency of a wet sponge, so they're not something that could be easily excavated, but they are perfectly intact. But there are some unusual features that we don't usually see. So this part right here, I mentioned earlier in that one I showed you, has this little, they have these, what we think are seats back there. And it does function pretty well on the one that they made in Ashfield. There's also these notches that we don't know what they're for. We're experimenting already with the one down there, seeing if it would work just resting your oar there, because we don't row, we paddle. So can we rest our paddle there? Is it a rest for a paddle? Was it for outriggers? Or were these two, because they're so similar, used in conjunction with each other, maybe like a catamaran? Because remember, back in the day, there was no Route 9, 290 bridge, Route 20 going across the lake. You brought everything you could, as much as you could on your first trip across, and then you had to go back and get more. Or you went around the long way, or the whatever way. You had to go around the lake, you couldn't go across it. So that was something that they were able to work out with, using the two of them together with something in between. That may have been something, but that would have been very unusual. We don't usually see that in dugouts in the New England area. You see it in some of the island communities. You see it. I think there were some that were out in West. I think Lewis and Clark actually used one as well. There are a lot of pictures of the model that they made. So here's the question: how did they get to the bottom of the slope? And this is my theory, but I don't know if everybody agrees with me. How many of you felt the earthquake that was in New Jersey about a month and a half ago? Did any of you feel that here? You felt it? I'm in Belchertown, I felt it. Ashfield really felt it. Traveled right up the fault line up there. So, there are fault lines that crisscross all under Lake Quinsigamon. I don't know if you knew that, but there are several that crisscross all underneath it. So, these were constructed somewhere around the time of the 1640, 50 time. Let's look at these earthquakes. The one that in New Jersey, by the way, that we felt up here was a 4.8. That's where I just moved from last year. So let's look at this one, 6.5, look at where that one was. New Jersey's down here, this is where the earthquake was. Now this one right here, this one was in 1727, that's a 5.6. This one right here, right offshore, 6.5, okay? So we're not just talking about these, we're talking about all the other aftershocks that go along with it, because they're still having aftershocks in New Jersey. Like I said, I just moved from there. And I'm getting these things in our community Facebook group. Was that another aftershock? And it was only like 3.0 or something, but they're all, So imagine what would have followed from this. Does it mean the earthquake itself caused a whole lot of moving and shaking that caused them to go down the slope? Maybe not, but it may have caused enough where there was enough erosion that made them go down the slope. We don't know. My thinking with this, especially after feeling the one up here, is that possibly it would have been around this time frame, because if it was any later, the more waterlogged they get, the more fragile they became. We'd be looking at a pile of rocks at the bottom of the slope as opposed to these perfectly intact Mishoonish that are there. So that's my theory. I'm not sure.
How would they know the severity of the earthquake 300 years ago?
How would they, because they
Yeah.
go by the damage that was caused in the
Okay.
vicinity of the area. They have historical record of, but that's a really good question. They didn't have the seismographs then or anything. So here's one right here. We've completed all of these things as part of our, the document and assessment part of the permit. And this is actually a photo mosaic. Remember I said the diver can't anchor himself to the bottom, so he has to float above the Mishoonish. And it's so long that he can't get it in one frame. So this is actually a group of photos that have been stitched together, and then the part that's in the silt is over here. It really would be better if it was this way, because we'd be seeing it on the on the slope, but this is here what one of those beautiful things down there looks like.
Overlap.
They're overlapping, you see, yeah, there is some, you can
They
see.
have to.
Yeah, yeah, we have to overlap, and because it's just too long to get in one frame. Okay, where's my, oh, here, so, here are individual pictures of number one. So over here, we're looking at this back, the stern, the back end there. And then, I'm trying to see, it's not so dark in here, so, right here is this little thing here that our machine maker Troy down there likes to call his Dunkin' Donuts cup holder. He's made this in the one down there. Meanwhile, we aren't sure if this is actually a knot that has worked itself loose, or if it was an intentionally made hole. In the historical record, there are Mishoonish that were used with a pole, with a sail. I don't know if there would be a need for that here. Also, poles that have suspended shell with oil in it that's lit for night fishing or eel fishing, things like that. That potential's there as well. I don't think we'd really know unless we had the opportunity to see if there were tool marks in there that created it, but it could be a knot that just worked itself loose. All right, so this part, some of these mysterious notches that are there, that's one of them. And number two, and you'll see how similar they are. So here's another thing with this. We don't really know what this is over here. This part, the seat. Another big thing over here that's like a notch or some type of a groove out. This right here scares the heck out of me. I don't know what it is. It's something big and metal. It's not hubcap. It's like, it could be a kettle maybe or a pot, but it's resting right up against the side of it. Just kind of, you know, I don't know what's under it. Did it cause any damage underneath it? But it's been there for as long as we've known about it. And then, let's see, can I even tell what this, sorry, it's not darker in here, but this is just giving this general area right here. Number three, so we got the call about the twins, and then October, I get another phone call from the same diver, Mike Brower, and you probably know him, he's the guy that travels up and down the lake in the red canoe. He said, how do you feel about triplets? There's one on the Shrewsbury side. So this is number three. The conditions right away, you can see, are very different. The pictures that we look at, you see the background is dark. Here it's much lighter, so it gets a lot of sun here. The water's a little deep, a little shallower. The bottom is gravelly and hard. There's a current that goes over it. So here, it's getting a little bit of movement with the water. It's getting oxygen. It's getting sunlight, where the other one is getting that constant 40-ish temperature all year round, dark, silty bottom, no oxygen. You know, so that's what's, you know, providing the great elements for preservation in the first two, but not so much in this one. This one, what we're looking at pretty much is just the bottom of it with the rocks still on it. The sides have fallen out, and that's probably all that's left of that. That's the one that's on the Shrewsbury side. Why is this so important to us and to you? Well, there are several recovered dugouts in New England, but most of the time they're recovered during a period of drought, and sometimes they're not properly preserved, or you know, they didn't have a way of preserving them at that particular time when they were recovered. So they aren't in great shape. They're not intact. It might be a piece of one. But the ones that we have here in our lake, right here, that y'all are helping me steward by making sure that we're not doing terrible things in the lake and throwing things overboard and dragging our boat anchors. We benefit from having all three of them in your lake here, in our lake. Two of them are just as our owners left them, like I told you, and just by studying them, we can learn a lot about storage and retrieval, preservation, all that type of thing. And we are teaching you now about our native traditions, just like we are down there at the shoreline, and you're coming and learning about how we did it in the past, and we're still doing it in the future. This right now, and the event, for lack of a better word, that's happening down there, this is what it is, that we have that thread from these ones, the Mishoonish that are in the water, and we're carrying that right through now to our children and their future generations, so that 25 years from now, Those children that are burning and scraping out the canoes, like the little one that you saw up in the first picture, they're doing the same thing. They're carrying this on to their children and saying, you know what, I remember doing this when I was a kid, let's keep on. And so it's that thread that just keeps on going, that we're passing on to the next 7 generations for us. And all of this, you know, me being as an educator, you know, right now it's the littles, but I'm happy to, you know, share educational opportunities with everyone. The whole process of it is just a great opportunity, not just to share about the Nipmuc community, but about all of this. And whenever we have people that are offering to share their technology, their expertise, we ask them, please bring your students, bring your interns, your grad students with you, let them do the work. You can just, you know, supervise what they're doing, but we want them to get the experience. Let us try and give something back by letting them share in that educational opportunity. So definitely something that's significant for all of us. The lake survey, this is part of the permit, is trying to find out more about what does the bottom of the lake look like. You know, what's that underwater map? So this involves, for those of you that don't know, side scan sonar is part of it, and the towfish right here gets pulled behind the boat, and we can see in real time, and I'll show you actual pictures of that, what is reflecting back from the bottom of the lake at us. So the best way, before I show you the pictures, to show you this, or to tell you this, is if you were standing on the beach and you took a cup of water and poured it into the sand, the water would just absorb it because it's porous and it's not a dense, and it would just absorb it. But if I poured that cup of water on this rock right here, it's going to splash back at me because it's very hard and dense. It's not absorbing it. So it works similarly. This is a very simple, you know, stewed down version of side scan sonar. This is one of the towfish that we use, and here we can see in real time while we're on the boat what data it's sending back to us through the cables. So here at the bottom of the boat, and over here are what the images that we're interested in. Again, bringing in students to help us out, making sure they're getting that experience. This part of the lake was done as well, but I haven't filled it in yet. This is all the area that's been covered thus far. Oh, and I didn't say in the beginning that the permit itself, it covers, originally it was just this area, but it was then expanded to cover the entire lake and the Flint Pond area as well. So we're doing our best to do the sonar on, you know, throughout the lake. And so here is an image, a side scan sonar image of number 1. And the way that we can tell this just isn't a tree is because the inside of it lights up because of the rocks that are in there. Remember, it's that very hard, dense object that it's hitting. Right here, see how the inside of it lights up? That's how we know it's not a log or just a tree. The inside is lighting up because that sonar is hitting it and it's reflecting back with that light signature. The number 3 over here, there's a little bit right there that we can see some of the rocks lighting up. Now there are plenty of other things that are down the lake, and while we've been traveling up and down, we see other images here like this, and the question is, are these just trees or are they also Mishoonish? We have different targets up and down the lake that we haven't yet put divers in the water to look and see and say, oh yeah, that's another Mishoon right there, look, or oh, you know, that's just a log with there's a cable running across it, there's a big thing of wire that's sending it back. So, you know, it's a lot of time, and it's not just being able to look at it and say that's what it is. It has to be confirmed by putting divers in the water or a drop-down camera. Here's a really good example of that reflection, because this is an aluminum canoe, and you can see right here how that light, it looks light here, that sonar is hitting that aluminum and coming right back at it. This right here is one of the 2 steamers that are down there. One of them is just south of Lake Park. And this part right here, like I don't think I have on my posters. I have the better pictures. I'll have to introduce that. This is the stack from the boiler that's coming up. You're looking down on that, and here, of course, you know, we have numerous cars that are down there that are spread out. And oh, there it is. I did put it there. Okay, this is what that steamer right here, one of them would look like. So here, this part right here, that's this. You're looking down that stack to the boiler. And this is the metal railing around the outside, that you're some of that reflection there. This is buried in the silt. So this is the only part that's really exposed is this part right here. So there's a lot of silt. There's also a lot of junk down. I'm sure you probably know that as lake residents, there's a lot of talk I see in the community groups, but there are, yeah, all kinds of things. This, number one has a bottle in it. Somebody threw a bottle off their boat or something, and that's in there. Up at the end up here, it's not in this picture, there's like bottles of suntan lotion all piled up on the edge of it there that you can see. This, I'm gonna back up, this right here, this is a truck tire and a Frisbee, and this is actually in very, very close proximity to one of the Mishoon. It's actually, I gotta look, over here, it's this truck tire over here. Did I stop it? It's this truck tire right over here. So here's Mishoon 1, and here's Mishoon 2, and this is one of my favorite side scan photos. If you were standing here and looking out over the lake, so your feet are like right about here, you're looking out over the lake. This is the slope now. You're looking down the slope, and this is right here is the bottom of the lake spreading out in front of you. So this way you can kind of see the way here. See here, it's all lit up, and then right here it stops. That's the part that's under the silt. Same thing over here. All the rocks that are in it, and it stops under the silt. And then there's all these shenanigans around here. These tires, 55-gallon drums, the another truck tire that's over there. So there's a lot of stuff and that concerns us, because especially when, like, you all know how it gets crazy with the partiers out there sometimes, and you know, if they get careless and throw things off the side, you know, they're very fragile. This is a handprint from one of the divers, most likely done when they were taking the core sample, but you can see right there, you know, the perfect handprint that's there now. Yeah, I mean, it's like, who's the guilty party? But I mean, in some of the photos that we have on my poster, I'm not sure if we have them here, but you may have seen them down there. You can see along some of the gunnels there that it's splintering where things have hit it, and they're that fragile that it can cause damage. This is a stone tool that was found off the shoreline of Edgemere. So those of you that live in that area, keep your eyes out there. This was found by a lake resident decades ago, and he was kind enough to bring it to our attention, let us share it with the community for a while. We were able to pass it around in our circles, and then he asked to have it returned to him, so we did give it back to him. But this is, you know, just further affirmation of our ancestors living in that area. And we know that there are more. We know that there are a lot of residents, lake residents, that have stumbled across things like this, or may have had things handed down to them. They may have a shoebox in their closet full of things that their grandfather collected when he was a boy right here on the lake. Those are the things that we want to learn more about. So if you have things like that, please share them with us. We don't want to keep them. We just want to learn more about them. Again, that info share is a big word. So from the archaeological aspect, summing that all up, and first diver, so this first one, even though it was the second Mishoon that was reported, was the first one that was documented. That was Chris Hugo that found that one. This is the one that was originally on eBay, that was discovered by Mike Brower, and this one also discovered by Mike Brower. These two have been identified as white pine, similar to what we're burning down there is white pine. This one has been sampled and documented. We haven't carbon-14 tested this one, and we haven't done the, we aren't sure what kind of wood it is yet, but we'll get there. You know, it's all part of the process. Look at how much we've done already.
Why was that one on eBay? I was a little bit late getting it.
Oh, because initially when the diver had found it, he had contacted the state, and I guess the whole process was just a little overwhelming for his resources.
And he wanted a reward, which the state does not provide financial
Yeah.
compensation for finding.
Right, so then he was trying to find someone that might have the resources, but he didn't know where to look, so he put it on eBay, and that's how I found it there, so, yes.
The location.
Correct.
Not the actual-
So there are things, there are things that we've attempted that, you know, we never were able to completely follow through. You may have seen us out there at some point doing, the divers doing an ice dive. This was quite an adventure. They got the whole cut, you know, we got everything ready. They got in the water, and then we got the phone call that they needed to get out of the water because there was a sewer line breakup by the Route 9 bridge. So that was the end of that dive there. Got very little photography, just that him getting out of the water. So the goal of that was to try and get clearer pictures, because hopefully the bottom was settling then, there weren't any algae blooms going on, and the visibility we were hoping would have been better at that time, but yeah, didn't want them in the water with that going on. So, and then this was GPR. This was UMass Boston that was brought students out to do GPR on the ice, and you know, usually you're doing that over the wall, over the ground to try and see what's underneath the ground or the lay of the land, but it was like, heck, let's try it on the ice and see what happened. And a lot of the data at that point was skewed, but now I'm hearing that there may be a way to de-scramble that data. So what was done back then is still of a benefit to us now, and we'll be revisiting that at some point, hopefully. It would be really interesting. So what do we want to do? Everybody's like, well, what are the NIMBYs going to do with these things? So well, we're still trying to discuss that in our own circles. So when the public leaves, in these gatherings that we have after you leave at the site of the Mishoon burn, we're talking about what do we want to do? What do we want to do with the one we're burning? Where are we going to put that? How are we going to store it? And what do we want to do with the ones in the lake? And we have kind of two different circles. We have some people that are saying, well, let's leave them where our ancestors left them. That's where they wanted them to be, let's leave them there. And then there's some people who are saying, well, that's not really where our ancestors left them. They went down the slope, maybe we should excavate. Because if we don't excavate, then we're not learning. So maybe we can learn, you know, maybe there's things underneath the rocks. Maybe there's fishing gear under the rocks, like hooks that were made or stone tools that they used to cut. We don't know. But I think that what my job right now is in these circles when I'm talking to them is educating them that yes, we can protect them in place, but we won't be able to see them, but we will be preserving them for posterity. If we take them out of the water, we're taking them out of that perfect environment that's caring for them right now. And once you do that, it brings in this element of perpetual care. And we need to be constantly, you know, and not just us, not just this generation, but going forward, making sure that we're providing what is needed to keep them intact and in a good way. So are we prepared to do that? So we need to discuss all of these things and ultimately decide as a community, what is it that we want to do with those Mishoonish there? And then once we come to an agreement, we revisit with the board. Do we want to move on to the next, you know, phase of the permit? Do we want to excavate? Because then that's a whole other thing, a whole other permit that's involved in coming up with the financial resources for it, coming up with the, ultimately, that final disposition right there. Where's it going to end up? Who's going to be caring for it? Because the minute it comes out of the water, that's when the process starts of trying to save it from degrading. And so do we want it in a place, you know, we are looking at a cultural center, or do we want to have it at another place like a museum to, you know, that we can collaborate with? And hopefully at some point when we do have our museum, the museum in Grafton is currently being restored. The inside of it, we just finished the outside, but the inside will be restored. Do we want to bring it there? So this is all the things, we have a lot on our plate and discussion-wise to determine what do we want to do with the ones that are in the lake. And, you know, this is one method. This is what was done with one that it was in the Mashantucket Pequot Museum, and this involves a tank full of typically polyethylene glycol chemicals, you know, that get circulated through that water. The Mishoon is actually in there, the one that was taken, that was in Connecticut. And but I know that a lot of my tribal members aren't feeling the love with putting our ancestors' artifacts in a tank full of chemicals. So, and I totally agree with them there. There are other ways. There's freeze drying. What's the pine resin or something? There's another. So there are other techniques to do it. But that would be something that we would be visiting if we decided that we wanted to excavate at that point. These are not ours. These are just different ways that excavation has happened in other ways. This was one of the ones that I think was, this one I think was in Michigan. It might have been Wisconsin. But these are not the recent ones. You know, the ones that they just found, like 10 of them in LA. This was from like 3 or 4 years ago. Documentary, working on that. We have tribal members who are experienced in that field now. So that whole process and this whole project, all of it, building little by little documentary that can show our community's journey through this whole process. Here, this particular Mishoon was one that was taken out to Deer Island, because every October we do a memorial for our ancestors that were brought out to Deer Island and left there. That many of them, most of them didn't return. Hundreds of our ancestors left out in Deer Island. At some point, we were paddling out and paddling out and paddling out there, and it's pretty treacherous going out there into the harbor in a Mishoon. However, you know, at some point we decided, let's turn that around. You know, so there was an elder who said, you know, why don't we just bring our ancestors home? So instead of paddling out there, now a lot of it's going out to Deer Island and bringing our ancestors home. And so this, again, that's another thing that is something we continue and teach our children to do, and hopefully when I'm really, really, really an elder, then I'll be seeing the little ones doing that same thing. So the one that was in Asheville that I showed you in the very beginning, this is them actually using that up in that area. And so it's a beautiful picture, and it really commemorates our ancestors and how in that period they would have looked. There were some folks that when they came down to see us down here, they were a little disappointed because we weren't dressed like this, and we didn't have, like a high tanning thing set up and a we tour and all of that. And that's not what this part is about. This burn that's down there, that's the community, it's the remembrance, it's the teaching, it's us as a network of people moving this forward. So we're doing it just as we are every single day. We're not doing it, to reenact what our ancestors would have done. And this is something that's very important to us. It's continuity. It's just continuing that tradition. So what's next? And most of it I've been over, as I've been talking. So it's mostly finding a suitable facility, or, if we're going to protect and replace, finding a suitable means to do that. Continuing to monitor and document, and that's, for those of you who know where these are, and I know some of you do know where they are. If you know where they are, you help us by being part of our team and letting us know. Do you see something out there that looks a little suspicious? Do you see divers out there and you didn't know there were divers out there? Please let us know, because some of you that are right now, our eyes on the water in front of those spots where those Mishoonish are, then, if I haven't contacted you and told you that we're going to be out there, if you see someone out there, just let me know so we can just kind of check things out, making sure there isn't harm coming to them. Doing more archival research, because there are so many records out there that relate to the indigenous people that were not properly set forth in the historical record. I mean, it's the historical record, but the way they were interpreted, I don't. So going back and reading them and looking through them, we're learning a lot from them, and now we have people within our own Nipmuc community to do that research. We're not relying on other people outside of our community to interpret their own way of doing. We're looking at it ourselves and interpreting it in our own way and reporting our own history, rather having someone else tell our history for us. We are now doing it ourselves. Let's see. And so all of these people that are here, and some of them are lake residents, some of them are boat operators, these are all people, and there are more that I haven't even added in here yet, that have in some way been a part of this project, either assisted with their technology, their boats, their expertise, all of that. You might recognize some neighbors, thanks to these guys right here. Thank you very much. And I really do want to show you video. I mean, we do have a couple minutes left, and then if you had any questions, just sit tight for 1 second so I can show you, because it is pretty cool. Got to get that out of the way. Stand by. Here it is. I keep forgetting I have a touch screen. Okay, so this is, I'm sitting like with it. So, yeah, this is what the diver sees, and it's really pretty interesting. So that's the algae out there, I'm guessing, all that. And the other one, I'll show you right after this, because they're just short clips, but at least you can get an idea of what they look like. Anybody have any questions? Yes?
Is there any chance that there could be more canoes in the lake?
There is possibility. So in the 1880s, I think it was 1886, they did a series of dives with the big metal helmets and the lead shoes right off of Lake Park down there. It was like 4 or 5 days worth, and the articles are all in the Worcester Daily Spy. But they did pull out another dugout, whereabouts unknown. They pulled out a Mishoon, part of a birch bark canoe, another stone tool. I think they said a stone axe head, and nobody knows the whereabouts of that. The Mishoon that is in the Worcester Historical Museum is not from this lake. This is from the Comet Pond in Hubbardston, and that's in their storage room back there. So there are some people thought that was it originally, but no, that's not the one. So.
Well, how was that one being preserved?
So that one originally was not very well preserved to begin with. It currently is moldering, and this is why it's not displayed to the public right now.
Not being preserved.
Right, and yeah, they were just pretty much back then. There's once it starts to degrade like that, there's really not a lot you can do about it. Like the Swift River one is splintering and has a lot of insect damage to it. and there's really not anything that can be done to it at that point. This is why you have to start caring for it as soon as it comes out of the environment that's protected. Anybody else? Questions? Yes?
Do you think that, if like as the climate gets warmer, if the decision is made to leave the canoes underwater, then like you might have to revisit that decision if like the water starts getting warmer and it's not able to keep the Mishoons like preserved down there?
Well, that would make sense. In other words, if it warms up and it starts, you know, like the other side.
It's the stasis
Right.
now, but that.
Right, right. So, I mean,
Yes.
if it happened, yes, but probably not likely for a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah, but with global warming, who knows, you know, so.
If you were gonna take one of the Mishoons out of the water,
Mhm.
how would something like that be funded?
So there are organizations and foundations in the state and, well, national ones as well, that have expressed interest in, you know, funding part or all of it. But the key thing is making that decision as to what do you want to do with it and where are you going to put it? Because until you have that place to put it, you can't even begin the process of anything else. You have to have that place guaranteed first. So it's kind of like a vicious circle, is like, we want to give you the money, but we're not going to give it to you now because you don't have a place to put it yet.
Makes
So it's just the math, you know, that whole, and you haven't decided what you want to do with it yet, so.
And it's not one move, it's a move from the lake to conservation to the housing, unless there's a way of doing it together,
No,
unlikely.
right, not unless it was like if we had, you know, a cultural center that, you know, we had in place and we could do it there, and then it was just, you know, after that, it was ready to be exhibited once the conservation part of it was done, and it wouldn't have to be moved, but that's not unlike, you know, that's not likely in the immediate future. And we talked about it, but at some point. So the excavation all is a little ways down the road if that's something they would decide to do, but, you know, I've gotta make that sure that we have a general consensus among our community. It's not my decision, it's my community's decision to do that, whatever we're gonna do.
How big is that community?
How big is our community? So with the Hasselmanisco band, we have about 2,000 enrolled members. And, you know, there are other bands at Nipmuc as well, but for us as a permit holder.
So if they stay there, they could ostensibly last hundreds more years just where they are, just
Well-
as they are.
They've lasted this long.
Yeah.
So, you know,
Wouldn't you be afraid that a boat anchor would get them someday?
I'm always afraid of a ball. Ask these
No.
guys whenever we get out there, it's like.
I mean, it seems to me the chances would be more likely than not. I'm surprised it hasn't happened
Please.
yet.
It's in 30
Well,
feet.
there's a lot of boats out there, there's thousands. of
There
boats,
are. Well,
you know?
when we were doing the side scan sonar out there,
Yeah.
I'm looking, I'm like, what are all those lines on the bottom? That's like people
Yeah.
dragging their boat anchors. I'm like, oh my gosh. And like, this is part of me being here now talking to you.
Yeah.
Because you guys are the lake residents, you're the ones that are out there. So, you know, these are all in the southern part of the lake, south of Lake Park.
Yeah.
And so if you're down there, you know, just think of your boat anchor before you move someplace else. They are in a spot where they are, you know, kind of out of the way, but
Yeah.
there is that potential.
It just
So-
seems like it'd be more likely than not eventually.
Well, let's
You know?
think
Well, the
about
luck is that they're
positive.
in 30 feet of water, not 10.
Yeah.
If they were in 10
Yes,
feet of water,
that would
they
be
probably wouldn't still be.
correct. If they were in 10 feet of water, they wouldn't even need it, probably right now. So, these are all really great questions. Anybody else have a question?
The artifacts.
Yeah, so on the back table here, there are some artifacts here that our archaeologists, and Greg, in the back here, it's Greg, what's his?
Lot.
Okay, from the Mass
Archaeological
Society. And so there are some back here. If you do have anything that you did bring with you, we would love to see it. If it came from the lake, we'd like to document it. If you're out and about and you're looking in the water and you see something that resembles what's on the table back there, you know, keep it in mind and please let us know. We'd love to have you share that info with us and make it a part of our project, make you a part of our project and a part of our team.
The location of the artifacts sort of helps us sort of safely tie the construction location, like, we know when we're building the replica, well, it's not even a replica, we're just building one.
Building
We call it a replica, is the fact that maybe finding artifacts that are used for construction, we might say, oh, this may have been a building site, may or may not be associated with these specific Mishoons, but it helps us make that determination, and previous archaeological records don't have a lot of documented sites. There are a lot of sites, but not a document in the state records for the lake area. So it gives you that kind of, oh, so we can add stuff to that record.
So you're helping to build the history of where you live.